Alright guys, we're back at it. Way of the Warrior Kid, Where There's a Will. Jocko, Willink. We're on chapter 17. Hopefully Mark gets some answers. What happened today was very unexpected, but I sure learned a lot. We had a pretty light day of work, but had fun doing it. Kenny and Nathan are really fun to have around. When we finished, Kenny and Nathan headed home and I got cleaned up, got ready for jiu-jitsu, and brought a change of clothes so I could go over to Danny's house afterward. Jiu-jitsu was fun too. We did monkey in the middle with takedowns, where the person that got taken down leaves the mat and a new person comes in to challenge the person that won. I did pretty well, but it is very tiring and eventually everyone gets taken down. After practice, we cleaned the mats and changed clothes. Danny was waiting for me and we walked outside to his car. His car was really nice. "This is my mom," he said. "Mom, this is Mark." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Reinhardt," I told her as I got in the car. "Nice to meet you too, Mark," she responded with a nice smile. They didn't live too far from the gym, and as we drove, Danny and I were laughing about one of the takedowns I had tried to do, but accidentally fell and was immediately out. As we pulled into Danny's driveway, it was just as I expected. The house was huge and completely perfect. It looked like a mansion, and the yard was very well taken care of. They had no need for Mark's meticulous mowing. As soon as we went inside, I heard someone yelling, "Danny! Danny!" It was Danny's brother, and he came running down the stairs towards us. As soon as I saw him, I could tell there was something different about him. "Hi, Danny!" Danny's brother shouted. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at me. His voice was a little hard to understand, as he kind of blurred the words together, sounding almost like he had some food in his mouth while he was talking. "That's a friend of mine," Danny answered. "Hello, friend." "His name's Mark. This is my brother Anthony." "Hi, Anthony," I said. "Hi, Mark," he said back. "Do you want to see my train collection?" Anthony asked. "Sure," I said. "Great," Anthony replied as he ran up the stairs. I looked at Danny and Danny looked at me. "He has a developmental disability," Danny said in a serious voice. "Oh, okay," I replied, unsure of how to respond. "It means he's developing slower than most kids. He can't do some of the stuff we can do and probably never will be able to. It also means he doesn't get to hang around with other kids as much as we do. So that's why I spend a lot of time with him." And it says, "I love you, brother." Wow. Here I was this whole time thinking that Danny just didn't want to hang around us and us other kids. And the whole time he was just taking care of his brother. "Danny, friend, come on up," Anthony shouted. "I got the trains out." "Okay," Danny yelled back. Then he looked at me and smiled. I smiled back. Let's go, I said. We went up the stairs and into a big giant playroom. I call it a playroom because it wasn't a bedroom. There was no bed. It wasn't a living room because there was no couches. It was just a giant room filled with toys. And a lot of those toys were trains. The simple wooden trains with that come with and a lot of those toys were trains. The simple wooden trains with that come with a bunch of pieces of wooden tracks that link together to form big tracks. "Trains!" Anthony shouted when we entered the room. We sat down on the floor and started building a giant track. Danny was so nice and patient with his brother. It was pretty amazing to see. And we had fun. We built a crazy long track with all kinds of curves, tunnels, and bridges, and then we pushed the trains around the track and set up different tracks and different trains. It was fun. But at the same time, I realized this is what Danny did all the time. And even though it was fun to do for an hour every once in a while, it had to be hard to do it every day like Danny did. "Does he like to do this every day?" I asked Danny. "He sure does," Danny said back. "Do you get bored?" "Yeah, I do. But if I didn't play with him, especially in the summertime, he really wouldn't have anyone to be around. And besides, it makes me realize that I'm very lucky to be able to do what I do. We both are." "Yes, we are," I replied. We kept playing with trains until Mrs. Reinhardt came up and said it was time for her to give me a ride home. "Okay, I've got to take you home. Danny is going to stay with Anthony," she said. "No problem," I replied. I stood up and walked toward the door. I'll see you tomorrow, Danny, I said, and I'll see you again sometime, Anthony. See ya, Danny said. Wait, Anthony shouted. Then he ran over and gave me a hug. Thanks for playing with me. No problem, Anthony. Your trains are super cool, I said with a smile. I know, he said. And with that, I smiled and headed out of the door. I followed Mrs. Reinhardt down to her car, and she drove me home. When we got to my house, I opened the door and got out. Thanks, Mrs. Reinhardt, I told her, looking back through the door. Thank you, she said back. Thank you for being understanding. Danny really likes you and appreciates you being his friend. And thanks for being so nice to Anthony. No problem at all, Miss Reinhardt. It was fun. With that, she smiled, and I closed the door. Once in the house, I told Uncle Jake about Danny's house and about Anthony and about his disability and about the trains. I said that Danny spends all his time with Anthony because otherwise no one else would. After I told Uncle Jake everything, he looked at me and asked, "What did you learn?" "Well, I learned about Danny's situation and about his brother," I said. "But what did you learn about you?" he asked. I wasn't quite sure what Uncle Jake meant by this. He says, "At this point, I'm an expert at solving mysteries." I must have looked puzzled because after quite a quiet moment, Uncle Jake said, "You should have learned a few things. You should have learned that just because people appear to have everything doesn't mean that their life is easy. You should have learned once again not to judge people without knowing them. On top of that, you should see your warrior kid code number 5, where you say, a warrior kid always tries to help others. Danny is really living that every day as he tries to help his brother. And you also should have learned, like Danny has learned, that you're lucky to be healthy and that you need to take advantage of that and be the best you can every day." "Yes, Uncle Jake, I learned those things too, all of them, and I meant it. I'm lucky to be healthy, lucky to be able to run and swim and do jiu-jitsu and have my business. I'm very lucky, and I need to always remember that." It's a good one.